I've always had at least one foot in the if you've got it, flaunt it camp. While I was flicking through the op-eds a couple of weekends ago, one of the headlines I hovered my mouse over was, "Are you ever too old for a bikini?" The old mutton dressed as lamb thing in a more beguiling wrapper. That clever little clickbait title acted like catnip to, well, a cat, and I was hooked. It turned out to be an advice column. The seeker of advice was worried about what to wear at her daughter's beach wedding and whether a bikini would be appropriate. Apparently there would be a lot of conservative types attending, and she didn't want to be seen as a try-hard attempting to look too young or an exhibitionist set on upstaging her daughter. Well, the main worry was about this specific occasion. It posed the broader question of whether there is an age beyond which one shouldn't go all itsy-bitsy teeny-weeny on the beach, at the river or poolside. Just as an aside, do you remember Itsy-Bitsy Teeny-Weeny Bikini? You have to be my age, I think, but it was immortalised in a truly awful song by Brian Hyland, written by Vance and Pockris. It reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, #8 in the UK, and sold almost 1 million copies in the first 2 months of its release, when Hyland was only 16, and over 2 million copies in total. If you don't know it, give it a go. It's really quite something else. But anything I could say might be construed as sour grapes. So back to the article. My first thought was, are you freaking serious? This is something you really need to ask. My second one was, good God, don't you have anyone better to discuss this with than an online agony aunt? But I'm often surprised by the questions people send to newspaper advice columns. Perhaps more accurately, I'm surprised by how many people lack self-confidence in the context of the question they're asking. But I'm particularly amazed when it's a question of what's okay or not to wear. Another headline that grabbed me a while ago was, how many rings are too many to wear? More eye-rolling on my part, I'm sorry to say. But the people asking these questions in the public glare of a high-circulation newspaper or magazine are doing the rest of us a favour by bringing difficult topics into the open. Whether the question's to bikini up or not, or any other variant of am I too old to wear whatever, it is indeed a good question. And it's a question many of us ask as we stare in indecision at an item in our wardrobe, while the mutton dressed as lamb monster lurks, rubbing its ends in glee and cackling at our dilemma. Gung-ho though I am, I'm certainly not immune to its judgments. But it's all part of the invisibility trap, the pressure to act or dress your age and not break the myriad taboos laid down over generations. So many conscious and unconscious biases are baked into our neural pathways from our earliest days about what's acceptable in almost every facet of our lives. It's particularly insidious when it comes to clothes. Running the gauntlet of dressing too young for our age is unthinkable. It would be almost preferable to die or become a hermit than be considered mutton dressed as lamb, shuddering as I write. But, like many buts, it's a big one. We get so caught up in worrying about it that we don't stop to worry about how effectively the wool has been pulled over our eyes, pun intended. Although lamb and mutton can be male and female sheep, like many social mores concerning appearance and dress, this little mutton dressed as lamb canal is uniquely applied to women. But where did the lambasting expression come from in the first place? Well, sheep meat is defined in two ways. Lamb is from animals up to 12 months old, young and tender before they're weaned, whereas it's mutton, mature and tougher, after that. The metaphor not only plays on this division in age and meat characteristics, but also acknowledges the culinary procedure of dressing something to cook, making it a conscious act. In other words, in this context, it's an attempt to gull others into thinking you're younger than you are. For this marvellous concept, I believe we can blame Mrs. Frances Calvert, who used it in her social gossip journal compiled in 1911. The quote was, "Someone the other day asked the Prince of Wales at the ancient music festival whether he did not think some girl pretty. Girl, answered he, not to my taste. I don't like lamb, but mutton dressed as lamb?" But there were earlier variants and other applications of the sheep, mutton, lamb epithet. I found this fascinating book preface, Mutton Dressed as Lamb, Fashioning Age in the Georgian England by Amanda Vickery. In it, the author references period publications like The Gentleman's Monthly Intelligencer, which noted in a 1737 article that a woman past her prime could be labelled an old ewe. In the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue, published in London in 1785, entries like laced mutton, slang for prostitute, and mutton monger, a man addicted to wenching, figured. But according to the Fashion History Museum, until the early 19th century, there was no real distinction in how the different ages presented. I'm quoting here, children dressed like miniature adults, and with an average life expectancy in the 18th century of 43 years, old age was not something to worry about, but rather to hope for. End of quote. Towards the end of the Industrial Revolution in the first half of the 19th century, fashion designers started offering fitting, again, pun intended, styles for different age groups, as people began to live longer through scientific and medicinal advances. Children got clothes that acknowledged their activities, like play, instead of making them so many mini-me's dressed exactly like their adults, their parents. Younger women dressed in sportier and brighter costumes, while older women were still trussed in subdued but highly elaborate colours and styles. But soon this separation became convention, and it wasn't done for younger women to dress too extravagantly or older women to dress too young. By the 1920s, the flapper era, older women were still sporting buttoned-up pre-war formal wear, while racy young women got adventurous. Hemlines shrank, whalebones were tossed away, and the lower legs became daringly visible as they charlestoned the night away. After World War II came Dior's new look, Courage's miniskirt, and many other couture innovations intended mainly for the young woman of the world. Acknowledging the growing gulf between young and old fashion, Vogue magazine even created a column for older readers called Mrs. Exeter. Apparently this catered to the woman of a certain age who chose colours to suit greying hair and similar suitable styles for every social occasion, town or country. Then came the youthquake that was the 60s, when the fashion world turned on its axis and the generational divide became wider than ever. While some iconic designers like Karl Lagerfeld made clothes that made older women feel sexy, the new kids on the block designed for hipsters and made clothes unashamedly for teens and young adults. In this world, mutton was even less welcome in lamb's clothing than ever. But coming back to the article, after reading it, I admired the woman for even contemplating wearing a bikini, because swim or beach wear is where many lines are drawn in the sartorial sand. However well-toned and put together the age-kissed body is, displaying it in a bikini is quite brave, and it can be confrontational to others struggling with their self-images and fears. It's one thing to bikini up in the seclusion of your garden or pool to catch some rays or enjoy a bit of water therapy, but should you flaunt it in public places? My body's not in bad shape for my age. I can't kid myself that it's in the same league as the movie stars of my vintage, but I'm proud of it, and I'm glad it's all down to my efforts, not that of any cosmetic surgeon or tweakment. While I recognise that my outer casing now is a well-lived life away from its younger versions, I still have fun dressing it. But even the most phlegmatic among us don't live in a vacuum where it's possible to ignore the knowledge that youth and beauty still rule the roost. As I've written about in one of my blog posts, I Feel Pretty. Bearing aging arms and strapless tops is one path mature angels like me often fear to tread. But fashion has our backs on that one, with so much choice of skimpy tops, with mesh or diaphanous disguising sleeves. But there's still some things I won't wear. Permit-style short skirts have been out of the running for decades, other than for fancy dress parties. I wore one recently to a Rocky Horror Picture Show fundraiser. The immortal Nora Ephron put it very well when she discussed the concept of compensatory dressing, which is wearing turtlenecks, scarves, mandarin collars to hide one of the big flags of age, a crepey neck. While it's often difficult to come to terms with it, there is nothing unnatural or shameful about aging skin and bodies. It just messes with our vanity and self-image. Our outer person is still young at heart. Our inner person is still young at heart, and it's hard to sync that with what we see in the mirror. There's also the other aspect that in showing too much of it scares the crap out of younger people. Oh my God, am I going to be like her one day? Anyway, faced with the bikini dilemma, this recidivist flaunter would probably dial it down if it were my niece or great-niece's wedding. To be honest, I can't imagine anyone in my family opting for a beach wedding, but you never can tell. The last time I went anywhere near a beach, I coaxed myself into a somewhat skimpy one-piece cosy. But a bikini is probably beyond my comfort level. Why? What difference does a small additional bit of covering make? I mean, for goodness sake, a one piece is just about probably 6 inches, 6 inches more material. But as we say in my brand world, it's all about perception, and that 6 inches makes all the difference in most people's minds. But as I've said before, if you feel bad about getting any part of your kit off, if you can't tone it, tan it. So to bikini or not to bikini is a choice. The length of your hemline's another choice. Whether you're comfortable baring your arms, keeping your hair long, or wearing tight jeans or figure-hugging wiggle dresses, all choices. I sincerely believe the choice simply depends on what you feel comfortable with. If you're hesitant about wearing something, don't. There's not much worse than suffering through an evening of wearer remorse. There will be something else in your wardrobe that you can really rock. But I hate that we're so inhibited by so many unwritten and outdated conventions and proprietaries. What's done and not done, the snobbery and judgmentalism that pushes us into a doom loop of self-flagellation. Who can measure up to other people's standards? So we might as well just set our own. When I'm ruler of the world, phrases like mutton dressed as lamb will be banished from the vocabulary in perpetuity, along with all those other ghastly limiting expressions that keep us chained up behind the bars of invisibility. So my advice, wear whatever the hell you feel good in and stay colourfully and gorgeously visible and vibrant.